The term citizenship is generally a synonym for nationality, but the word has yet another meaning. It refers to the legal duties and rights of a citizen. Now, legal duties means certain responsibilities by law and obligations towards the benefit of a community. We generally know about obligations like paying our taxes, like defending our country, voting. But what about volunteering? What about offering our skill sets towards the growth of an impact organization? Citizenship, philanthropy, and volunteering are all part of the same bag. And on today's episode, we have a guest who's been working progressively towards that. Welcome to yet another episode of In Pursuit of. Gunjan is a seasoned professional with 15 years of diverse experience. She started her career in banking and then she went on to quit her corporate job to start a social enterprise. While running her enterprise, she realized that education was a key to uplifting poor families out of poverty. And then she started volunteering and mentoring their children. After this, Gunjan transitioned into leading a philanthropic movement. So, welcome, Gunjan. Welcome to In Pursuit of. But first, I want to know, in your own words, what you are in pursuit of.
So currently I'm in pursuit of growing this movement called Living My Promise. It's a movement where people commit to give away 50% or more of their wealth to philanthropic causes, either in their lifetime or in their will. How and where they want to give is completely their choice. So I'm in pursuit of growing Living My Promise.
Very nice. So, but I would love to know more about Living My Promise. But before that, I'm curious to know what made you quit your corporate job and what made you move to starting your own social enterprise and then get into the development sector.
I had the privilege of having a successful career in the banking sector. However, there were few triggers, both personal and professional, which got me questioning whether that is something that I wanted to do for the long term, and was I really creating value for myself. Fortunately, all through my corporate tenure, I was deeply involved in the volunteering activities. And when I connected the dots, I realized that I wanted to create a deeper impact. And that's when I took the plunge of starting Desi Origin, a tech platform which enabled women run self-help groups, small farmers, and rural artisans by connecting them directly to the end customers. And at Desi, I was working very closely with non-for-profit organizations. And by this time, I was almost sure that I want to keep working in the social impact space. And when I looked back, I realized that I thrived on relationships, and working with different communities excited me. So that's when I transitioned to lead Living My Promise, a philanthropic movement, full time. And that's what I do currently.
What does Living My Promise do exactly? I understand. And they give away 50% of their wealth while they're still alive. How does this entire thing work?
It's important to clarify here that Living My Promise is not an organization. Living My Promise is a philanthropic movement. What Living My Promise does is give a sense of community so that their individual philanthropy can be bettered by being in this community.
So when you say it's a community, how does it work? I mean, there must be some guidelines. Let's say I'm a philanthropist, okay? And or let's say a philanthropist gets onboarded, and or how they get onboarded, what happens if they want to say, if they want to put 2 crores out of their wealth, how will they ensure that it gets to the right impact organizations? How will they find those impact organizations? So if there's no organization, who does it for them?
We need to realize that the gist of philanthropy lies in choice. So we do not talk about where they should be giving and how they should be giving. And Living My Promise is built on principles of mutual trust, respect, and freedom. What we do if somebody needs help on where to give, we realize that there are a lot of organizations in the ecosystem which do this full time and are experts in the field. If a philanthropist in the community needs help, we connect them to these organizations. So in that sense, I would say we are a dot connector. We are an ecosystem builder, but we do not advise them on where and how they should be giving. And more often than not, any kind of help they need is mostly fulfilled within the community itself, because they interact with fellow philanthropists. And a lot of time there is somebody else who is also working in the same cause area, is able to guide them with the organizations that they support. So it's a community where each, people help each other better their philanthropy.
Right. But then doesn't that happen if it's in the same network that people that you end up funding the same organizations? Because say philanthropist A, philanthropist B, and C are all funding the same organization.
I haven't seen that happening here, at least, because, if you look at India, the opportunities to fund are so many. It doesn't really happen that everybody is funding the same organization. And even if they do, these are engaged philanthropists, they would look at the impact the organization is creating. So as long as the organization is able to create the impact that they are set out for, it doesn't really matter how many people are supporting that organization.
I understand year on year. At the same time, there are many organizations also who are not found, who are not discovered per se. Then what happens with that? How do you ensure that you are able to fund, say, organizations that you have not heard of? How do you authenticate?
A lot of these philanthropists have their own individual giving philosophies. There are people who only want to fund young, NGOs. There are philanthropists who want to fund the more established NGOs and the more well-known names. But people who want to look for newer NGOs, there are now, with so many incubators and so many ecosystem builders. It's, I won't say easy, but we can still find NGOs in the remotest part of India where people are ready to fund them. In fact, every year we have a giving event during Danutsav in October, where we invite younger NGOs to come and pitch. It's on a Shark Tank format. We call it a dolphin tank, where our promisers become dolphins, and these smaller NGOs come and pitch about their work to the dolphins. And these are all younger NGOs, are our 3 years of inception. So we do keep looking for organizations which need support and are not very old.
So just to understand compliance, this is not a CSR. So when philanthropists give what compliances, etc., do NGOs have to fulfill, for CSR funding, they have to get a certain certificate, right, for ATG, etc. But what about for philanthropic funding or grants?
Each individual philanthropist, depending on how they are giving, whether they have an NGO and they are giving through that NGO, whether they have created a trust or a foundation, or are they giving from their personal wealth. Depending on how they are funding the organization, they would themselves, ask the organizations to give the required compliance, documents or whatever is required. But Living My Promise does not, dictate anything in terms of what the compliance requirement should be, as long as the NGO is a registered NGO and have the required checks in place. But the compliance requirement comes from the individual philanthropist.
Okay, so is this largely for NGOs or is it for social enterprises also?
Depends what they want to fund. Depends whatever the funding requirement is.
Most funds and most grants are restricted funds, or rather a lot of them, and they almost believe that there should be no admin costs. How is an organization going to run? So restricted grants, acha, you can use it only for this project, right? And that's where, in my opinion, it creates a sense of a lack of transparency over time, because someone has to fund the rent of the office or the admin work, etc. What happens with Living My Promise? What are the grants like?
The grants come from the individual philanthropist. However, I would say, working with this group of 133 philanthropists now, they are more strategic givers, and they do not delve too much into whether the organization has high overhead cost and this. They are more engaged philanthropists. As long as the organization is able to create the impact, they believe in supporting the organization with whatever is required. And most of the grants that the group gives, sometimes even collectively, are unrestricted funds. as long as the organization is able to tell them that they'll be creating X impact with those funds, no question asked, it is a completely unrestricted funding. And I think that is required.
That's pretty commendable. So what's your opinion about, the government has really come down on the NGOs, saying that, there are a lot of fake NGOs, etc. And, there's been a lot of restrictions. A lot of NGOs have shut down because of that. What do you think the government is doing right and the government is doing wrong in terms of improving the social landscape of or the development sector landscape of India?
The views that I express here are my personal views, so it's not the group that I represent. But in general, I've seen that the government is moving more towards distrust of the social sector, which is unfortunate, which should not probably be the case. It would be nice if the government realized that the citizens involved in philanthropy would probably have far better impact than government trying to be everywhere and doing everything by themselves. What government could probably do is have better policies in terms of support the giving and philanthropy. For example, removing the 10% cap on the ATG benefit, also giving higher tax breaks. Like, if you look at US and UK, they have 100% tax rebates. Probably that is what the government should focus on, and better friendly tax policies or policies is something that we need.
That's a really, really good thing you've said, because yes, I mean, so often people actually give to, fulfill the 10%, tax rebate. But what about those who are giving far more than that 10%? And I think it would encourage people in terms of giving half of their wealth, but even in retail giving, it would encourage people to give more, you see?
Absolutely.
In part 2 of this episode, Gunjan shares how Living My Promise started, the impact their support has had, and what a budding philanthropist needs to get right.